Hello, short stacks and superheroes. My name is Tibius Guy, and what's the deal with Poppy? She's a very old champion. She's from all the way back in 2010, scarcely a year after League of Legends was first released, and by sheer virtue of having been part of the game for so long, she's become kind of iconic to it. Poppy is as much a part of what League of Legends is in the minds of a lot of people as characters like Ryze or Ashe. But she's also a character who has had a substantial visual update a couple of years ago, changing not only the core of her lore, but overhauling almost everything about her character design, save for the fact that she remains a Yordle. So, was this a successful character update? Did it make her better? Did it give her a better story, a better character design? Well, yes on all fronts. She's substantially better and just improved in every single possible way from what she was before the update, but it might be interesting to take a little look at why and how. So, this is Poppy in her current form, the Keeper of the Hammer. She is a Yordle on a quest. As her story goes, one day, while out wandering, she comes across a group of human settlers, just going along in a caravan trying to found a settlement. Now, she has grown disenchanted with the ways of the other Yordles. They are all sort of airy-fairy-like, running around, casting magic and having fun, and she seeks something more structured and orderly. So she meets a man in one of these caravans called Orlan, and she basically becomes a little bit enamored with him. She finds a level of structure and togetherness and community with him and his group that she just doesn't find anywhere else. So she decides to do something that Yordles don't normally do and reveal herself to him, and they become fast friends. In fact, Poppy begins training under him as he is a great warrior, and she helps him as he founds this new little settlement, this tiny little upstart nation called Demacia. So Poppy is very much part of the founding story, the origins of Demacia itself, and as Orlan, who is mortal and human, dies, he passes his hammer onto her and tells her that the hammer doesn't really belong to him. It's a hammer that was meant to go to the hero of Demacia, the only person who could keep Demacia whole. Poppy then swears to him that she will find this hero and place the weapon in their hands so that Demacia will be safe forever. And as her biography closes, but what Poppy possesses in resolve, she lacks in ego, as it never even occurred to her that she might be the hero Orlan described. So this Poppy is tied very, very strongly into Demacia itself and its origins, which, from a lore perspective, might cause a little bit of a problem, because in a later, much later lore update, Demacia was updated to be a place that is profoundly hostile to magic. I mean, just, they kill people who happen to possess magic, which I imagine would make them, like, somewhat hostile towards magical creatures like Yordles. This has never been fully explored in the updated lore, and it might be that Riot accidentally made a little bit of an oopsie here, but certainly, according to Poppy's lore, magical creatures were very much part of the founding of Demacia itself. So the core of the concept here is kind of a poetic irony that Poppy is a character who is so unegotistic, who is so duty-bound and so humble that it doesn't occur to her that she might be the target of a prophecy, that she might be, you know, a great hero, someone who's destined to do great things. She's just someone who wants to be part of things. She's not necessarily someone who wants to be a leader. And as setups for a story goes, that's actually really solid. You can do a lot of stories just based around, first of all, extending the joke that Poppy doesn't understand that she's actually the hero, but also exploring something about her character, like why she thinks she's not the one who's supposed to be the hero. There's a lot of opportunities for character growth and interesting introspection there. The downside to this kind of lore concept, however, is that eventually that joke wears out. Like, eventually it becomes like, okay, but you've been carrying that hammer around for like 150 years now, and you're consistently the only person who's any good at using it. Does it not, like, at some point, it kind of has to become a thing where, like, if you haven't figured it out at this point, you're stupid, which makes the character unsympathetic. Like, when someone is just too thick-headed to see what's patently obvious, that's only funny for a while. That's the risk of the character concept that they've gone with for Poppy here. But as it is right now, because they never did any kind of lore follow-up for her at all, ever, after the update, which is what Riot tends to do when they update champions, she's still stuck in a state where the joke still works, like the concept still lands. She was also released with a comic, which I never had an opportunity to cover on my channel, and it's actually one of the much better ones in League of Legends, essentially exploring the same story that she has in her Color story, that she comes to a place, she thinks she finds a hero who's worthy of the hammer, turns out they're not, and then she has to deal with the situation that the hero was trying to deal with herself. Namely, a giant freaking monster is attacking a city. So she meets this guy, this hero-looking character, and she's like, maybe if I throw the hammer to him, he can use it to bash this beastie down, and nope, turns out he can't, so Poppy instead picks up the hammer and absolutely wrecks face. This is one of the best action sequences in any League of Legends comic, by the way. Makes it worth reading just all on its own, because the effects and the way that things are drawn is just put together really well. I really like this comic, so I wanted to mention it in passing, even if I don't really intend to go through it, you know, page by page, as is my usual behavior right now. So Poppy's old lore was complete. There was no, I mean, she has a connection to Demacia in her old lore as well, but that's about as far as it goes. In her old lore, Poppy was the Iron Ambassador. She was a Yordle girl who lived with her blacksmith father, who was instructed to make a helmet for Demacia in general. And as they go to try and deliver this helmet, they are ambushed by Noxian spies who kill her father, but Poppy perseveres and delivers the helmet to Demacia. And for that, she's awarded the position of ambassador from Bandle City, which is the Yordle region, to Demacia. In this conception of the lore, Yordles are known, but in the new updated lore of League of Legends, Yordles are kind of like these fairy-like creatures that sort of live in hiding, that hide themselves from the human populations of the world. In the old lore, this was not the case. They were very much an integrated part of the politics that dominated old League of Legends. And so none of that really persists at all. She's not a blacksmith's daughter. She's not an ambassador or a diplomat of any kind. She wasn't assassinated. She hadn't had her father assassinated by Noxians. None of that remains. Pretty much everything about her, except for her connection to Demacia, was stripped out of the old lore. And honestly, it's for the better, because the old lore of Poppy, where she's an ambassador to Demacia, and indeed, she has a strong connection to the politics of League of Legends, which was the central focus of the old lore, where the League of Legends was an actual set of political games in the League of Legends universe, where you fought on the Summoner's Rift in order to gain political favor for your faction. That makes a lot more sense with a character who's an ambassador, like that a person who's connected to politics would go into the League of Legends and fight. In a modern conception, like, the whole point just doesn't work anymore. Like, they could have kept the thing about her being a blacksmith's daughter and making the hammer and then delivering it to someone. Or like, you could kind of probably have woven some of it in, but I don't see that there would be much point to it. It makes more sense that Poppy is someone for whom finding a kinship with Demacians gave her a consistency in life that she had been lacking where she was. Like, then it becomes more of a story of finding your identity, of finding your place in the world, whereas old Poppy, there really isn't anywhere to go with her characterization. She's like, I hate Noxians and I fight, you know, on behalf of Bandle City and Demacia, and that's my characterization. So Poppy's new character design stands in stark contrast, and again, everything about her was changed except for the fact that she's blue and that she's a small Yordle. In her old character design, I think I have a better picture of that actually here. In her old character design, she's very much identified with gold, and she's very heavily armored, and this is partly because of the aesthetic limitations of the old League of Legends graphics engines, that this is a very Warcraft 3 looking character. This huge, comically oversized hammer with the tiny handle and this like big bulky ass shield, and this sort of very boxy armor that kind of just obliterates any sense of her shape as a character, because when you see her on the battlefield from that top-down perspective, she literally just becomes this little blob that runs around on Summoner's Rift, and it's kind of hard to make out what she's like. So the primary identifying features of her are her giant ponytails, her shield, and her hammer. And I think that's a gameplay consideration that comes a lot into how this character was designed, is that they wanted to exaggerate certain aspects of the character in order to make the way that they act in the gameplay more clear, which is a technique that Warcraft 3 certainly also often uses. Modern Poppy, on the other hand, she still has the comically oversized hammer, but the hammer now looks proportional, where the old one had this ridiculously short handle that just did not make sense from any kind of weight balancing perspective. This hammer has a length and a proportion to it that's accurate, and which makes it look like she's carrying around a hammer that's meant for human hands, which again emphasizes this idea that she doesn't quite understand that the hammer belongs to her. It seems to be too big for her, in the same way that she feels like she's too small to carry the burden of this great prophecy. So, like, thematically, there's a great interaction there with the size, like the relative oversizedness of the hammer represents the size of the burden that it has put upon her life. There's also some other changes going on. First of all, she has a much more distinctive character shape, which is partly just courtesy of increased polygon counts. Whereas this old Poppy is just it's kind of just a box with some legs on it. New Poppy has, first of all, a much more pronounced shape. In fact, with the new Poppy, there's a little bit, not much, but a little bit of an hourglass shape going on with the pronounced chest plate and the leather skirts around her side, which is something that helps to highlight femininity a little bit. This is something we've talked about before, is that you can design decent-looking armor with a little bit of an hourglass shape, with like very slight feminine shape language in order to highlight the femininity of whatever character is inside the armor. You can also not do that, but it's a character design option that you have. Something which is not really done with old Pop. She's just like covered in shit that doesn't really chainmail everywhere, or scale mail rather, it looks like, and just some armor pieces that don't really make any sense. It's sort of, she looks like a pit fighter or a gladiator from some particularly bad 1980s fantasy film. New Poppy has a much more naturalistic armor design, something that looks more like it would have been crafted for someone who's wandering across the world. She has these sensible boots, these very warm-looking pants, big, thick leather belt with a buckle that's deeply impractical, and this small, light chest plate. Like, it doesn't look like she'd be weighed down or burdened too much by walking around in this stuff. It looks not necessarily super comfortable, but it looks practical. It looks sensible, which again reflects on Poppy's personality, that she is this very sensibly minded, unegotistical person who's not really interested in being flashy or heroic. She's just interested in doing her job, doing the job that she promised to her friend all those years ago. So what's been kept? Well, she's blue, she's a Yordle, and she has twin pigtails. That's pretty much it. The furry ears were added when it was decided by Riot that Yordles from now on are actually small furry creatures of various descriptions. Tristana got the same treatment, receiving her long furry ears along with her visual update. Now, the shield on Poppy has also been somewhat de-emphasized, here's where we get into the gameplay discussion. Something that was brought up to me in comments by some of the people who've been suggesting that I do a video on Poppy is that she looks less tanky than she used to. And I think that's actually very true. Because old Poppy was literally just a box with a head and a giant hammer and a big-ass shield. She looked very compact, she looked very solid, she looked relatively difficult to kill, whereas new Poppy, just because the hammer is more proportional and it dominates a lot of her character models, she looks more like she's tailored towards aggression. And again, I'm not a gameplay expert, but it kind of seems to me that old Poppy, with her charge you down, insta-burst you, and kill pattern, at least as far as I remember when playing against her, was actually more aggressive than new Poppy, who has like stuff to stop charges and who has this, massive engage ult that's primarily supposed to help set up her team for a team fight, that kind of thing, and help disengage and peel and all that other stuff as well. So I think in terms of visual design, new Poppy maybe looks a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more sort of like a light, agile fighter with a giant weapon that can do a lot of damage, whereas old Poppy looks more like the kind of tank that new Poppy is. But new Poppy just looks better. Like, just this giant, golden, just loud-ass armor design and this ugly-ass hammer. It's just, old Poppy is a mess of a design. She's just... And I'm not even talking about the textures on her face, which, good lord, I don't even want to think about Lollipoppy. She was not very nice looking. She wasn't a very pretty design. She wasn't even a very cool design or a very interesting one. She was just this kind of boring, lumpy, bumpy thing that didn't really communicate much of anything. Like, what the hell is that expression even? New Poppy, all in all, is a much stronger design, a much more distinctive design, a design that makes a lot more sense in the modern aesthetic of League of Legends, and a design that enables so much more interesting storytelling. Like I said, her sensible sort of journeyman kind of armor, it makes her look like a traveler. It makes her look like someone who just passes through places looking for something. She looks like a seeker. She looks much more like what she is, whereas old Poppy, I mean, whatever else she looks like, she does not look like an ambassador. She doesn't look like someone who's connected with politics. She doesn't even really look like a blacksmith's daughter. That's one of her skins that was actually Blacksmith Poppy, I think it was called, that actually made her look a lot more like that aspect of her character. And yeah, I mean, she was just... she wasn't a great character. I keep almost saying some rather unpleasant things about her, but the long and short of it is she wasn't a very good character design. New Poppy is, on every level, I think, a substantial upgrade. Now, I think that's about all I have to say about Poppy. She's someone who I would love to see Riot do a lot more with. Like, there's so much more you can do with her. There's so many more stories you can tell about her that they just have not at all taken advantage of. Anyway, if you are so inclined, you can support these videos on Patreon, help me make more of them, basically. If I make some money doing this, I can dedicate more time to doing it. And you can also get various perks and benefits, including access to the community Discord, which usually I only put out links that allow 25 or 30 people in, so a lot of people haven't been able to get in. If you want to be guaranteed getting in, then it's donation of $1 a month on Discord or on Patreon will do that. And you also get to vote on topics for future videos, where currently I do have a topic up that specifically deals with the Yordles. What were their design concept back in the day? What are their design concepts like nowadays? Why was this change made to them that turned them away from being a political faction in League of Legends? And I also got something on the great lore retcon on League of Legends, and some comparative analyses of the aesthetics of Overwatch and Fortnite versus PUBG and COD. If you don't want to support the Patreon, that is of course 100% okay as well. I'm just glad you watched this video. You can leave a like if you're so inclined. There is a subscribe button if you want to watch more videos like this, but the dislike button has been cursed by a witch, and consequently it doesn't really work correctly anymore. Like, you click it and you're probably gonna be fine, but there is like a 0.1% chance that one of your hands gets turned into a frog, and then you have to go see a wizard, and it's like a whole thing, and it's expensive because you know they only take galleons. So, you know, if you must click it, then you do that at your own risk. Thank you very much for watching.